Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am your co-host, Thomas Vick, joined by your co-host, Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing fantastic. And you gave me a great bit of news that I didn't really know before, or maybe I knew and forgot. But you have a YouTube channel for your law office and are starting to put out some more information there. So that was really fun. I'm glad you shared that with me. And I'm looking forward to getting out there and seeing what you're doing so I can copy those ideas.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Often imitated, never duplicated. That's what they
That's
say.
right. I love it. I love it. Yeah, we're doing great. It has been here in Central Indiana very, very cold, and school's been in and out and delayed and different things. So it's kind of nice. We're starting to see some pavement on the roadways again, and not so much snow. So it's good to be out and about and back on the mic with you, kind of talking about launching your law firm, and then as that has launched now, how do you learn to navigate it moving forward as we get toward the end of January here?
Yeah, this is the end of January 2026. And so when you get to the end of the month, one thing that you need to think about is, closing the books, making sure that, your accounting is up to date. If you've got a CPA that you're working with, making sure that all of the transactions are booked into QuickBooks or your accounting software, whatever the service might be, and making sure that you're solid in knowing where your numbers are. I think that maybe the topic for today is, what do we do at the end of the month to know where we are as a business? Law practice is a business. A lot of people kind of cringe at that idea, but you're doing law practice in order to make a living, to support your family, and all of that kind of stuff. So part of running a successful business is knowing your numbers and also knowing what your plans are going to be for the future, for the firm, and maybe even personally what you're going to do. So the end of the month is really the time to be thinking about those things. So I think it would be a good topic for us to discuss what are ways that we can kind of keep track of how we're doing as a business in the practice of law, and how do we kind of plan for future events.
Yeah, and again, it's fascinating to have different viewpoints on this because it's just so helpful, I think, to get a well-rounded view of what's possible. And it can be simple, it can be complex. It doesn't have to be there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution, but you do need to know some basics. And what really brought this to mind is kind of the finishing up of last year's numbers and finishing up taxes for the year. Obviously, individually, you're starting to get in your different tax forms at the end of the year, but business wise, you also have those tax forms, right? So the one that started for me was, we got to go through our list of folks we've paid and issued 1099s, right? So you got to make sure you know how to go back through a year's worth of transactions and figure out how and who should get a 1099. And then you got to figure out, well, do I have all the information I need to even prepare and mail these out, because I have this obligation as a business owner? So to do that, we utilize QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks is well known in the accounting world as kind of the accounting software, and that integrates very well with our practice management system for time and billing and Clio. But QuickBooks Online handles all of those expense transactions, and we can pull vendor lists and different things and figure out who do we owe information to. And it can also help prepare some of those forms as well. And we happen to utilize an accountant to help us with that in terms of preparing certain forms and things, and review those and obviously sign off on them. So you have to know those numbers. So that was kind of the impetus for the conversation here, and got me thinking about, we talk a lot about Clio, and we talk a lot about sort of some of the AI tools that are coming out and those things, but we don't often talk about what are the back office things that we rely on. For accounting, we use QuickBooks Online. Thomas, what do you guys use?
Yeah, we actually, well, you say we're not going to talk about Clio, but I use Clio Accounting. So I use Clio Accounting for my bookkeeping. All of my accounts are synced with Clio Accounting. So it makes it easy for my accountant, who can have an account to log in and look at my transactions, review them, and categorize them properly. Clio accounting is really great because it syncs well with the billing in Clio. It knows what invoice has been paid on what date before you even get to review the transaction. And so it's able to match the transaction a lot easier than QuickBooks. It's also cheaper than QuickBooks Online, at least last time that I checked. And so it's really helpful. I like the fact that the CPA can go in there and double check things for me, categorize things properly. But yeah, Clio accounting is what I use. 2 years ago and years prior, I was using QuickBooks Online. I was doing my own bookkeeping, and I think that worked out, for the most part, fine. But, I wasn't always the most diligent about every single month going through the transactions. It was more like once every 3 or 4 months, I would go back through the transactions and match them up. And I know that wasn't a good practice. And so now I've got a CPA that's helping me to do that. And there's still work that I have to do to inform the CPA what has happened with certain transactions. But, I logged on this morning to my Clio accounting, and all of my transactions, with rare exception, were already booked, for me from the end of December actually through the end of January. So I really didn't have to spend any time thinking about even clicking the button to match it. So, and that has saved me a lot of time, and I think it has saved me some money on taxes too, just having some expert advice with a CPA that is closely working with my law firm and giving me tax advice.
Yeah, what a great point, Thomas. I mean, that having that capability and that team is really a game changer. And we talked about this recently with Michael Robinson in terms of when you get started out and you're just wearing every hat and trying to get everything done, to where you can start building and go, maybe I do need to hire someone, but I'm afraid about what this is going to do and how does that work. But the bookkeeping one and the accounting side is one of those things that takes so much pressure off of you as the practicing lawyer in the office and frees your time up to then do revenue generating work. And so you're spending much less as a percent of total of your time working on data entry type issues. And obviously very important to have everything balanced to the penny and, figure all that out, especially with the trust accounting and all of that happens. And so it's so great to have this time in my practice versus where it was when we started. And I was doing like you, like manually tracking all of those different things and making sure I could track down that wayward penny wherever it may have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so accounting programs are certainly something that are not necessarily law practice focused, but certainly you need to have an accounting plan. You got to have some kind of way to keep track of your transactions. What are some other back end tools that law offices can take advantage of?
Yeah, the standby is Microsoft Excel. Having that spreadsheet capability or some type of database type system that you can use and navigate and look at the data that the various programs are able to export is so helpful. And so my process is I utilize the QuickBooks Online reporting features to get my profit and loss, my balance statements or balance sheets, and take a look at those numbers. But it's hard for me to get context with that sometimes. And I'm sure there's a way in QuickBooks to do this and build reports. And hopefully, somebody can point me in the right direction on that someday. But right now, I'm familiar enough with Excel that I can just pop that information into a custom made spreadsheet that shows me what I want to see and what I want to track about the performance of the office. And so Excel kind of becomes for me the glue that holds everything together. And I've used different things over time and really like some of the capabilities of programs like Airtable, which is an online database program. Very, very powerful, very, very fun. But I find myself spending more time like messing with it than actually getting the work done. And so Excel, I can kind of build it and say, hey, we're going to use this for this year. I can add to it and adjust to it. I've used it enough that I'm familiar with how it works. And it doesn't have to be perfect because I'm not presenting it anywhere. It's just something I'm looking at. And then my team can get into it and add data that, so I don't have to actually do I'm typing in all of this information twice or copying and pasting it from whatever Clio or QuickBooks exports. I can go in, look at my reports, spend 30 seconds and go, okay, we're here. Here's the decisions I need to make. Here's maybe an adjustment I want to make in the new year. Or as we've talked about before, now I have that information at my fingertips when it comes like malpractice insurance renewal time. And I need to know, well, how much of my revenue was by this practice area or by these people, or what was my average case value and those kind of things.
Yeah. I think the Excel spreadsheet is definitely, I mean, a lot of people use it, but it's underrated in the capabilities that it has. I think it's, a great way to kind of not only understand where you've been, but also kind of forward thinking, put together what your priorities are for the firm. Like, where do you want the firm to go? Like, are you saving up for maybe a a down payment on an office building or something like that? Well, you can put that into an Excel spreadsheet and start building towards that goal, and just make it a priority. Like, this percentage is going to be going towards this priority every single month, if I get a profit. And that's been helpful to me. You're just able to determine what my priorities are, how much of a priority is it, and then move on it. And the decision has already been made. You don't need to wrestle with, well, I need to keep this much money back, or I need to think about this other priority. You've already thought about these priorities ahead of time. So when the profit comes, you know where to put it.
Yeah, and what I love about the formula, if you will, it not just the Excel formula, but the formula that I've created for the year. It's kind of my rule book. Playing a game isn't a whole lot of fun unless you have the rules. And if you watch NFL football, you have rules so people can argue about whether the rule was met or not or what have you, right? We got replay, we've got commentating, but we have a rule book. And so I look at my spreadsheet not so much as binders on like I have to do it this way, but these are the guardrails. And so I know if I'm in these guardrails, I'm doing okay. But also, like you said, the prospective, this is what I want to do and where I want to go. And here's how I'm going to start getting there and creating that inertia to get started. And so maybe it's only $10 a month that I can set aside to do something. But over a year, that's a lot more than I had if I hadn't set that aside. And so just starting that habit, I think we've talked about this on the podcast, but one of the things that we do in the office to that end is basically every dollar that comes in the door, we set aside 10% for a giving allocation. We set aside 10% for a saving allocation, and then we try to operate off the remaining 80%. Now, at the end of the month, I will true that up to actual net, because if I take 10% out of every dollar that comes in, that's off gross, right? So, but I've already set that money aside in my sort of budgeted savings account. Then I can reallocate that to adjust to how the month went, right? And I've already got that money set aside. So when I'm looking at, okay, we have this amount to write, I know I've got a check ready for that amount. And I don't have to worry about, well, where am I going to get the money? How's the cash flow going to work? So it's just giving me that sort of rule set that here's how the dollar comes in, here's how it's going to be allocated. Then I look at it at the end of the month and adjust it down to where it needs to go. Then I start on the next month. And my goal is to try to get several months ahead in terms of what I need expenses wise, right? So that may be my goal. Your goal may be, no, right now I need these funds to do this thing. So that's how I break it up.
Yeah. I love the idea of these are the rules that I'm setting for myself, and you're exercising discipline as a business owner to not just set the priorities, but actually to do them every single month. And you really don't have to think about it. It kind of reminds me of a book I read recently, The Millionaire Next Door, and so much of that book was about, how do you, are you going to be disciplined enough to save money? And, when you're in a law office there and, you've kind of gotten off the ground floor and you're getting some clients on a regular basis, and money is starting to come in the door, there's going to be an ebb and flow to that money coming in. There are going to be strong months, and then there are going to be weak months, and you've got to build that in. I mean, the temptation is to, if you had $1,000 a month and you're used to getting, $12,000 a month, well, you've got all this extra cash to go on vacation and all this kind of stuff. It's, you could have an $8,000 a month, 2 months from now, and it's a lot different. So you really have to exercise discipline with how you're setting aside money and, planning for, the coming months, but also the coming years, and what, maybe capital expenditures you want to eventually make for your business.
Yeah. One of the easiest examples that I can think of in that realm is, let's look at a computer, right? You may have a computer that you started with. It was this computer that got you through law school, and it's sort of on its last legs, but still has some life left in it. You're going to have to replace that at some time. It's not going to last you forever. Or you may bring new staff in, and you've got to have enough set aside to do that equipment purchase or add in or what have you. So that's one of those things, obviously kind of gets lumped into a category, but that's kind of how I think about it. It's like, okay, if I need to replace a computer, what's that cost? And then I divide it by 12, and I try to set aside that amount of money every month. Or you can roll it up by category and say, well, we have 15 computers and we got to do, it's a matter of scale at that point. But those are the things that, hey, in an ideal world, if we can do this, let's do it. And if you stay disciplined with it over time, you'll look over at your account and go, wait a minute, I've got $5,000 set aside here for computers. That's great. Now, you don't have to go spend it, but you have it available if something happens, and it decreases the stress in that moment. If a hard drive fails, you don't have to worry about it. You just buy a new computer, recycle the old one, and you're back in business and moving on. So just little things like that over time. Again, start small with it, but I love the idea of being intentional and having that plan of, hey, this is what I want to do. So you know what you're doing with your money, rather than, I think, as Dave Ramsey says, wondering where it went.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Accounting, use some kind of online program to keep track of your books. Secondly, take advantage of Excel spreadsheets to kind of plan out what you want to do with your profit whenever it comes in. That also is a motivating factor. If you see, I'm fulfilling these priorities every single month, it's going to motivate you for the next month and to keep going and just keep that cycle spinning. I don't know that there's anything else that really comes to mind. I guess one non-law practice management program that I use is an answering service. It is specifically for lawyers. I use Lex Reception. And Lex Reception, they handle phone calls for lawyers. They take messages, they can set appointments, it can sync up to your CRM program, whether it's Lawmatics or Clio or some other law practice management program that you have. And I found that to be helpful simply because sometimes you can't get to the phone, and that can be really useful. It's better than I hate having to call an attorney and leave a voicemail. It's the lamest thing. I feel like I'm in 1985 whenever I have to leave a voicemail to an attorney's office, and if it's probably not going to be returned until noon the next day or 4 o'clock the same day. Personally, if I'm a prospective client, I want to be able to talk to at least some human being. And these folks at Lex Reception or some other answering service can provide that, human voice to hear the concern, take a message, take a phone number, make sure the name is correct. And then with my particular answering service, they're almost too diligent about getting the name correct, spelling it for the client. But it makes me look better when I know exactly how to say the name and the correct spelling and all of that. I don't have to be confused about it. So I found that as kind of a back end office management program.
Yeah, and I think that underscores the point of what is it we are trying to do with our practices, and that's serve clients. And so I always think about the metrics in the law, in the law office that matter. So that's one of my driving questions is, as I'm looking at all this stuff, what are the metrics that actually matter? And what are the metrics that motivate my team? And it's not, at the end of the day, often dollars and cents. It's how many clients are we able to serve? And that's really kind of what you're talking about with getting that live person on the other end of the phone to help that client get to where he or she is going. There's nothing more challenging, I think, especially for a prospective client, than, well, I've left this voicemail, but do I wait till they call me back, or can I keep moving forward until I can talk to somebody? Then I've got extra work to do after I did find somebody who picked up. And so you're helping in those regards. And so I think keep that in mind when you're looking at the numbers. Again, it's probably easier to get caught up in the numbers and like, oh, I could do this. And what if that's why I love the 10-10-80 kind of methodology, because it keeps me focused on, I'm intentionally setting aside some of this money to give, and that keeps me in that right frame of mind as we're going through that, and recognizing that I'm stewarding the funds that are coming through my office for my team. Right, I've got people I got to pay for my clients. I've got to do good work so that they continue to send me the revenue that comes in, and for the community. Right, and so those are really big things to keep in mind. Don't get so caught up in the formulas, which I'm certainly guilty of from time to time, that you lose sight of what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. Being a people focused law firm is really what it's all about. Being there to serve. Clients come and they talk to you, and they've got, they're stressed out and they don't know what to do. They're very confused, and being able to serve in that role as counselor in that moment is really the honor of being an attorney. There is remuneration that comes through the practice of law, but at the heart of law practice, it's serving the client, and it's so important that you remember that. And that's really what we want to convey in the Lifetime Legacy lawyer mindset, is to be people focused and service oriented.
Yeah, I often say we value relationship over remuneration, and that ethos, if you will, really is helpful to keep the right frame of mind. That at the end of the day, we're all people, and we need to remember that you're probably going through a hard time if you need a lawyer, or you may be doing some proactive planning. Our world, in the estate planning world, or crisis planning because somebody needs help with Medicaid kind of things, and so got to keep that relational aspect in mind. And I think that helps move and determine actually then what metrics matter and what metrics motivate. So great discussion today, Thomas. I really appreciate that. I'm always happy to have the behind the scenes look. You and I will often kind of share where we are on our personal journeys and things, and get great ideas on how to actually deliver this kind of stuff. So that's a lot of fun to have that discussion today. Anything else before we close up?
I don't think so. I always enjoy it as well. Appreciate being able to chat with you about law practice, and let's just keep it going. Let's keep the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast going and make it even better in the future.
I love it. To that end, I think probably by the time this show publishes, we'll actually have emails associated with the Lifetime Legacy Lawyers domain. And so we'll be posting those. If you have questions, you can email either Thomas or I directly. Frankly, we haven't decided what those email addresses are going to look like yet. So once we get those done, we'll get that out, announced on a new podcast. But those are set up, got a lot of fun stuff in the plan for the year for the podcast and for the business itself, and making things happen.
Sounds like a plan. Everybody check out the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer YouTube page. Subscribe. We try to post on a regular basis. I keep that page, fresh. And then also check us out anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and continue to follow us on those channels. We are the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast, helping lawyers launch. Have a good day.
Thanks, Thomas.